Before sunrise had fully lifted the fog from the mews, Helena Petrov was on her knees in the breakfast room, picking jagged white petals of porcelain from the carpet, while milk bled slowly into the weave. "Mind the edge, you stupid girl," Lady Petrov said. "If you slice your fingers, you will stain the obusen." The command came too late. Helena had already felt the thin, bright sting along her thumb, already tucked the injured hand into her apron, so no drop would fall where it ought not. At 22 she had learned to move quietly through rebuke, as a swimmer moves through cold water. No flinch, no splash. Breath held until she could breathe elsewhere. She kept her head bent, dark hair pinned too tightly at the nape because Lady Petrov disliked loose tendrils and called them slovenly. A strip of morning light crossed the floor and touched Helena's face, thin, pale, too serious for fashion, too still for easy admiration. In candlelight, strangers sometimes looked twice. In daylight, most did not look once. "A plain, clumsy burden fit only for service," Lady Petrov went on, turning from the wrecked tray to inspect her own reflection in the silver urn. "God knows what your father was thinking, indulging you in books and languages as if you were a son." Helena set another shard in her palm and said, "Yes, my lady." Do not "yes, my lady" me in that tone. "Yes, my lady." It was the correct tone. Respectful, level, empty of defiance. She had practiced it for 4 years, since the fever that took her father in 6 wet September days, and left the house to his widow's management. 4 years since the music room had gone silent, except when furniture was moved to auction. 4 years since his library, once a breathing thing full of open folios and laughter and arguments over history at supper, had become a locked territory whose shelves were slowly thinned whenever Lady Petrov required ready cash. Helena rose carefully, porcelain in one hand, tray in the other, and crossed to the sideboard. Her father had once commissioned that sideboard in walnut, hand-carved with laurel leaves, because Helena, as a child, had admired a Roman frieze in a book and asked whether wood could look like stone if a clever man tried hard enough. Now its drawers held bills tied in ribbon and letters Lady Petrov answered only when they contained requests she could deny. "Mrs. Bligh says coal prices are rising again," Lady Petrov said, as if reciting a personal injury. "Everything rises except men's generosity. We shall reduce kitchen fires another degree." "The cook says the scullery already freezes," Helena said before she could stop herself. Lady Petrov turned. "Did I ask your counsel?" "No, my lady." "Then save your opinions for whatever poor house eventually takes you as companion, though at your age—" She gave Helena a cool, assessing glance, the sort horse dealers used. "One can hardly expect many offers that are not charitable." Helena lowered her eyes and folded the cloth over the last sharp fragment. The old anger rose and settled again, not extinguished, simply stored. Her father had taught her arithmetic at this very table, tapping columns with an ink-stained finger until she could add faster than his clerk. He had taught her French by making her read Molière aloud and laugh at jokes she only half understood. He had said, more than once, "Stillness, Lenotchka, is not surrender. Sometimes stillness is aim." She had not understood him then. She did now. By noon she had mended linens, rewritten 2 invitations in Lady Petrov's hand, and corrected the butcher's account by 3 shillings and 4 without taking credit for it. By 3 she had carried tea upstairs and listened to her stepmother discuss her as if she were a parcel delayed in transit. "She must be placed," Lady Petrov told Mrs. Canning, who smelled of violets and new debt. "I cannot carry dead weight forever. Governess, perhaps, or companion to some invalid aunt. If not, there are always arrangements." "Marriage?" Mrs. Canning asked. "Marriage is expensive for girls with no bloom and less dowry," Lady Petroff said, "but old men still enjoy obedience." The women laughed. Helena stood at the door with the empty tray and thought, with sudden clarity, that she could disappear from this house and be spoken of for exactly 1 week before becoming an anecdote. When evening came, she sat at the small desk in her room under the eaves and copied accounts into neat columns for herself. Income once expected, income gone, debts rumoured, debts known. Her handwriting was precise enough to satisfy her own nerves, each figure upright, each date aligned. The discipline calmed her. Numbers were obedient where people were not. She paused only when voices drifted up from below and her own name rose through the floorboards, sharpened by anger. "Will not be made ridiculous in my own circle," Lady Petroff said. "If she cannot attract a respectable offer naturally, then we shall make occasion." A chair scraped. A man murmured agreement too low to catch. Helena dipped her pen again. The ink trembled at the nib, then settled into a clean line. She did not yet know what occasion Lady Petroff meant. She learned 3 days later when a maid arrived carrying a gown box wrapped in tissue and command. "You are to wear your mother's blue satin tonight," Lady Petroff said, without preamble, "the one with seed pearls. Have Nora lace you properly for once. We are invited to Ashcombe's musical." Helena looked up from the account book. "His Grace the Duke of Ashcombe?" Lady Petroff's expression sharpened at the question, as if curiosity were insolence. "Do not look so astonished. We are not exiles, and mind yourself there. Speak only when spoken to. Smile if needed. You are not to wander into conversation with radicals, clergy, or men who smell of cigars." "Why am I coming?" "Because," Lady Petroff said, "you cannot be sold from the stable if no one inspects the horse." She left before Helena could answer. The satin had belonged to Helena's mother, dead since Helena was 7 and remembered mostly in fragments: cool wrists, lavender water, a lullaby in imperfect Russian. The gown smelled faintly of cedar and old seasons when Nora shook it out. The waist was too loose at ribs and too tight across shoulder. Helena had grown in the wrong directions for inherited elegance. Still, when candlelight struck the fabric, it deepened to midnight, and for one unguarded instant, Helena looked in the mirror and recognized not beauty exactly, but presence. "Don't let her see you like that," Nora whispered, pinning the last fold. "She'll think you proud." At Ashcombe House, carriages crowded the Crescent Drive and spilled silk and jewels onto marble steps lit by flambeaux. Music floated down from somewhere above, violin and fortepiano, disciplined and bright. Helena had been to assemblies before, years ago when her father lived, but tonight she moved at Lady Petroff's elbow like hired help in borrowed gloves. The Duke's household was run with military precision. Coats vanished, cards were taken, ladies directed, no one left wondering where to stand. Helena saw the Duke only once, at first, across the crush of guests near a doorway lined with mirrors. Tall, dark-coated, composed to the point of severity. He was listening to an elderly admiral and looked as though he heard every word while offering none of himself in return. "Do not stare!" Lady Petroff hissed. "I wasn't!" "You always look as if you are observing. Men dislike being observed by women with no title." Supper was set in a long room striped with gilt and candle smoke. Helena took the seat indicated, 2 places from the lower end, beside a curate who apologized whenever he reached for anything. Conversation rose and fell around her in practised ripples. Horses, Parliament, influenza, a scandal in Cheltenham. She kept her eyes on her plate and spoke twice, both times to ask for bread to be passed. Then, at the far sideboard, a footman stumbled. At first it looked like clumsiness, the tray tipped, glasses shattered, a scatter of red wine across linen. Then he dropped to one knee, one hand clamped to his side, face drained to paper. A dark bloom spread between his fingers. No one moved. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. A man swore softly about the carpet. Helena was on her feet before thought caught up. She crossed the room as if summoned, skirts brushing chair legs, and crouched beside the man. "It's reopened," he whispered through clenched teeth. Old cut." "From where?" she asked. "Spain," he said, then bit back a cry as blood welled. She did not ask more. She stripped off her evening glove, then gripped the blue satin hem and tore a long band from the inner flounce. The rip cracked through the room louder than a dropped plate. "Hot water," she said, not loudly, but with command she did not know she possessed. "And clean cloths, now not scented linen, plain. You, help me lift him. Keep pressure here." A young gentleman stared at her. "Madame—" "Here," she repeated, pressing his hand to the wound. He obeyed. Chairs scraped at last. Servants ran. Someone protested that a surgeon should be fetched. "Send for one," Helena said. "But if you wait for him without pressure, he'll bleed before the carriage turns." She wound the satin strip hard, knotted, checked his pulse with blood-slick fingers, the way her father had taught her after a coachman's accident years ago. The footman's breathing eased by increments. Colour returned in thin, stubborn threads. Only when she sat back on her heels did she become aware of the silence. 40 people holding still as if music had stopped mid-note. Across that silence the Duke of Ashcombe was watching her, not with surprise alone, nor with that social curiosity people used when deciding whether a woman might be amusing. His expression was unreadable, but attentive in a way that made her suddenly conscious of her torn gown, her bare hand, the wine and blood on the carpet. A maid arrived with steaming basin and cloth. A surgeon, red-faced and indignant at delay, followed minutes later and grudgingly approved the pressure bandage before taking over. Conversation resumed in cautious fragments, then gradually swelled, though now every glance near Helena carried calculation. Lady Petrov's smile, when she reclaimed her in the antechamber, was sharp enough to cut wire. "What possessed you?" she whispered. "Do you imagine this is a barracks? Tearing your gown, issuing orders." He was bleeding. "He was a servant." "He is a man," Helena said, and instantly regretted it. Lady Petrov's grip tightened on her wrist until the bones pressed. "You will remember yourself." The carriage ride home was silent except for wheel rattle and rain beginning against glass. Helena watched droplets race each other down the pane and felt the tremor arrive now that action was done. A delayed shaking in her hands she hid in folds of satin. In the hall, Lady Petrov did not remove her gloves before speaking. "Lord Fenton has made an offer," she said. Helena blinked. "An offer?" "For your hand, such as it is. I accepted this evening." The words did not fit the room at first. They floated, disconnected from meaning, while Helena stared at the wet hem of her dress and the small smear of someone else's blood near her cuff. "Lord Fenton is—" She stopped. Everyone knew what Lord Fenton was. Widowed twice, 48, a man whose groom had once appeared in church with a broken jaw and whose favourite hound had been shot in the paddock for limping after a hunt. "A man of means," Lady Petrov said crisply. "A man willing to overlook your deficiencies. You will be grateful." "I cannot." "You can and will. The settlement is generous." To whom?" Lady Petrov's face hardened into something beyond annoyance. "Do not test me tonight. The banns can be arranged quickly. The wedding will be within a fortnight." A fortnight! 14 days to be transferred like furniture into a house where doors shut from the outside. Helena felt fear then, clean and cold, but no tears came. Tears were currency. She would not spend them here. "I wish to retire," she said. "Do!" Lady Petroff snapped, "and pray for humility. You have had an excess of notice for one evening." Helena climbed the back stair because the front felt exposed, each step creaking as if announcing sentence. In her room she shut the door, leaned against it, and stood very still until the hammering in her chest slowed enough for thought. Options arranged themselves brutally: obedience, marriage to Fenton, disappearance. Refusal, legal coercion, perhaps confinement. Lady Petroff had threatened both before in jesting tones that were not jokes. Flight without plan. Ruin, hunger, capture. She crossed to the washstand, scrubbed blood from her fingers, and looked up at her reflection. The tear in her mother's satin gaped dark at her knees. Her face was colourless, eyes enormous, alive in a way she had not seen in years. Her father's old study lay 2 floors below, locked since his death, except when Lady Petroff needed papers. Helena had no key. She had, however, watched where one was kept, taped beneath the 3rd drawer in the morning-room escritoire, hidden badly by hands that assumed servants never observed. "Stillness is aim," he had said. She waited until the house settled. Doors latched, fires banked. Lady Petroff's bell rung once for chocolate and again for silence. Then Helena took a candle, slipped downstairs in stockinged feet, and let herself into the morning-room. The key was where she remembered, cold against her fingertips. The study smelled of dust and leather and a faint ghost of tobacco that made her throat tighten. Moonlight striped the rug. She went straight to the desk, the broad mahogany one her father had called his ship's deck, and opened drawer after drawer. Old receipts, clipped quills, a broken seal, maps, letters tied in bundles. At the back of the lowest drawer, beneath an account book she recognised from childhood, lay a packet sealed in dark wax. The superscription in her father's hand read, "To His Grace, the Duke of Ashcombe, to be delivered by my daughter Helena Petroff, if necessity requires." Her breath caught so sharply the candle guttered. Necessity had arrived. Helena pressed the packet to her bodice, as if it might steady her pulse. Outside, rain thickened on the windows. Somewhere in the house, a board popped with the heat leaving it. Within a fortnight, she could belong to Lord Fenton in law, with no appeal that anyone would hear. Without money, without allies, without name beyond scandal, she could be erased politely and permanently. But her father, who had taught her figures and languages and how to knot a bandage one-handed, had left this one narrow bridge into a world beyond Lady Petroff's reach. She did not know what the letter contained. She only knew whom it named. At dawn, before the maids lit the kitchen fire, she would leave for Ashcombe House. If the Duke refused to see her, she would be sent back, and the door would close forever. If he admitted her, the danger would change shape, not vanish. Either way, tonight ended the life she had endured. Helena extinguished the candle, stood in the dark study with the packet against her heart, and chose. She did not sleep. Helena stood in the study until her feet numbed on the cold boards, then slipped the sealed packet inside the plainest dress she owned, and returned the key to its hiding place beneath the morning-room drawer. By the time the first grey of dawn thinned the windows, she had changed from torn satin to brown wool, pinned her hair, and written 3 lines on a scrap of paper she left on her narrow bed. "Gone to deliver papers from my father's desk. I will return when I may." It was not explanation, it was delay. The kitchen maid had only just opened the scullery when Helena went out the servants' door. Fog pooled in the street, milk carts rattled past, and a knife grinder called to no one in particular. She kept to the edge of the pavement and walked faster than propriety allowed, one hand flat against her bodice to feel the packet still there. Ashcombe House rose from the mist in pale stone and ironwork, severe and elegant as a judicial sentence. The principal steps had not yet received callers, but side traffic had begun. Tradesmen, a post rider, 2 maids with market baskets. Helena gave her name to the porter, who looked first at her hem, plain, damp at the edge, then at her face. "I must see his Grace," she said. "I carry a sealed communication in my father's hand. The Duke does not receive at this hour." "Then I will wait at this hour until he does." The porter's expression suggested a nuisance category he knew well. "Name of your father?" "Alexander Petrov." Something flickered. Not recognition exactly, but uncertainty. He sent a footman inward with the message and left Helena standing in the passage while cold crept through her gloves. 10 minutes later she was shown not into any drawing room, but into a narrow morning office, with a high desk, maps on the wall, and a steward who smelled of sealing wax. "Miss Petrov," he said, not offering her a seat. "Mr. Crane, His Grace asks the nature of your business." She took out the packet. The wax seal bore her father's signet, cracked at one edge with age, but intact. "This is addressed to him. I was instructed to deliver it myself, if necessity required." Mr. Crane frowned at the superscription, then at her again. "His Grace is occupied." "I am to be married in 14 days to Lord Fenton," Helena said, each word clipped so her voice would not shake. "If I leave this house without speaking to the Duke, necessity will have arrived too late." That finally moved him. She was told to wait. She waited nearly an hour, standing because the one chair in the office had a broken cane seat, and because a sitting felt too much like surrender. At last, a footman came and led her through corridors that smelled of beeswax and coal smoke, to a library lined from floor to ceiling in dark wood and restrained splendour. The Duke of Ashcombe stood near the hearth, though no fire had yet been lit. In daylight he looked younger than she had guessed the evening before, and harder than rumour had ever conveyed, clean-shaven, controlled, black coat cut with military precision. He did not come forward. "Miss Petrov," he said, "you have caused disruption before breakfast." She held out the packet with both hands, so he would not see either one tremble. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace. It could not wait." He took it, glanced at the hand on the front, and for the first time something in his face altered, very slightly, like a locked mechanism turning one notch. He broke the seal, read the single page inside, then read it again. Silence lengthened. Helena kept her eyes on the carpet pattern so she would not watch his expression and invent hope where none existed. At length he folded the sheet once, precisely. "Who else has seen this?" "No one." "You are certain?" "Yes." He walked to the desk, placed both letter and envelope in a drawer, and turned back. "I will not discuss the contents with you at present." The words hit like cold water. "Your Grace, I said I will not discuss them. Not now." She swallowed. "Then I have no claim here." A pause. "Claim is an unfortunate word." "It is the only word I possess this morning." His gaze moved over her, not ungentle but assessing. "You left your stepmother's house without permission. Society will interpret that as either seduction or madness by noon." "By noon?" she said. "They are efficient." One corner of his mouth almost moved. "Quite!" He came no closer. "What do you ask of me, Miss Petrov? Money? Intervention? Carriage escort home with stern instructions to your lady stepmother?" "No." "Then what?" The answer rose before fear could strangle it. "Employment." It was his turn to pause. "Employment." "I can copy a legal hand in English and French. I keep accounts. I calculate faster than most clerks if they are honest enough to show their totals." Her throat tightened, but she kept going. I do not ask rescue. I ask wages and a roof I am legally permitted to stand under." The Duke studied her, as if weighing not her words but the structure that held them. "If you enter my household as staff, you accept household rules. You answer to my steward in work matters and to Mrs. Halberd in domestic ones. You are paid modestly. You do not receive visitors without permission. I accept. You may be dismissed. Then I will leave dismissed, not sold." His eyes sharpened at that, then flattened into formality. "Temporary post," he said. "Copyist for estate ledgers and correspondence. 2 weeks' trial. Mr. Crane will arrange terms." Helena exhaled only when she realized she had stopped breathing. "As to your current residence," he continued, "you will not remain in this main house. My sister Lady Beatrice occupies the west dower wing with her companion. You may lodge in the upper rooms there under her supervision. It will satisfy appearances, as far as appearances can be satisfied." "Thank you, Your Grace." "Do not thank me yet," he said. "This will be unpleasant." He was right. By evening, Lady Petrov's first note arrived, edged in black as though mourning decency itself. It demanded Helena's immediate return and informed His Grace that harbouring an ungrateful girl would damage all parties. The Duke sent back a reply through Mr. Crane, brief enough to sting. "Miss Petrov is employed by my household and not at liberty to receive private instruction during contracted hours." The second note came from Lord Fenton directly, the script heavy and blotched. "A wife does not bargain. You have accepted by silence. Return." Helena burned it in the scullery grate and watched the paper curl like skin. Work began at once. She sat in a smaller office, off the archive room, copying land rents, shipping manifests, pension disbursements, and legal drafts into clean books, while clerks moved around her with the caution reserved for volatile chemicals. Some were polite in that pinched way that means I do not know where to put you. Others avoided her entirely. At church the following Sunday, a space opened around her in the pew as naturally as oil pulls from water. 2 ladies she had known since girlhood looked through her as if she were architectural detail. In Hyde Park, passing carriages slowed just enough for fans to tilt and eyes to narrow before rolling on. She heard her name attached to phrases like adventurous and trap laid with blood, and once the Duke's charity case said kindly and therefore worse. The Duke denied each insinuation with the same measured line whenever cornered in public. "Miss Petrov is in my employ." No defence of her character, no intimacy, no apology. The phrase functioned like a wall. At first, Helena hated him for its coldness. Then she understood what it prevented. The real danger came in ink. A solicitor's letter arrived on cream paper thick as insult, bearing Lady Petrov's instructions and Lord Fenton's impatience. Helena was commanded to return by Thursday for publication of bans. Failure would trigger petition to have her declared mentally unfit, citing hysterical conduct at public table, irrational flight, and delusions regarding household moneys. She read the letter twice, once for fear and once for legal openings. Then she carried it to Mr. Crane, who read with pursed lips and took it to the Duke. That evening Ashcombe sent his own counsel to draft a response. Miss Petrov, being of full age, lawfully employed and not under guardianship, would not be surrendered to coercive arrangement. Any petition regarding her mental state would be contested with affidavits from witnesses to her competent service. It should have steadied her. Instead, it clarified the battlefield. If Lady Petrov could not drag her home by authority, she would bury her by scandal and debt. Helena bent harder over the ledgers. The Duke's estate accounts were impeccably kept, yet older archive boxes held copied banking notices from associated houses and correspondents. among them, to her pulse-jolting surprise, transactions referencing her father's former holdings. She asked permission to index those boxes for cross-referencing rental arrears. Mr. Crane granted it absently, expecting drudgery, not excavation. By candlelight, page by page, Helena traced patterns. Disbursements marked as pension funds routed through intermediary accounts. Notes of transfer to the Petrov household after her father's death, then abrupt cessations. Promissory debts newly opened under Lady Petrov's signature within weeks of each transfer. Duplicate withdrawals on identical dates. Interest terms usurious enough to smell of collusion. One bank draft bore a witness signature she recognised from Mrs. Canning's card table. She copied everything in miniature into a private notebook hidden inside her mattress straw. Days tightened around this rhythm. Office, whispers, letters, ledgers, sleep-thin as gauze. Once, in the corridor outside the archive room, she passed the Duke and would have stepped aside, but he stopped. "You are pale," he said. "I am working." That was not a compliment. She almost laughed, then didn't. Nor was it inaccurate. His gaze flicked to the bundle in her arms. "Mr. Crane says you requested old transfer books." "I did." "To what end?" "To know why my stepmother fears paper more than shame?" Something unreadable crossed his face, approval perhaps, quickly hidden. "Do not accuse anyone publicly yet." "Was I going to?" "Yes," he said. "You have that expression." He moved on before she could answer. 3 days later, Lady Petrov arrived in person. She came to the West Wing at calling hour in lilac silk and moral outrage, swept into Lady Beatrice's sitting room, and refused tea, as if tea itself were vulgar. Helena entered when summoned and stopped just inside the door, hands clasped to still them. "Helena," Lady Petrov said, voice dripping injury, "enough theatrics. You have made your point. Collect your things. I am employed here. You are deluded here. His Grace has been very patient with your little collapse. But patience is not protection. Lord Fenton is prepared to forgive this spectacle if we proceed at once." Lady Beatrice, knitting by the fire, said mildly, "Miss Petrov is not a parcel to be returned for store credit." Lady Petrov ignored her. "If you do not come now, I shall have physicians attest to your instability by week's end. There are respectable houses for women who lose command of themselves." Helena felt the old freezing fear try to climb her spine. She pushed it down with arithmetic. Dates, signatures, amounts. "Would those physicians be paid from the same account that paid Mrs. Canning's marker in March?" she asked quietly. Lady Petrov's nostrils flared. "What nonsense!" "The account ending in 17B at Briar and Holt," Helena said, still quiet, "or perhaps from the pension transfer dated the 12 April, converted 2 days later into a personal note at 14%. Lady Beatrice's knitting stopped. Lady Petrov rose so quickly her skirt hissed. "How dare you rifle private records? How dare you call me mad for reading numbers?" Colour flooded Lady Petrov's face, bright and dangerous. "You ungrateful—" Helena did not raise her voice. "If you are certain of my madness, my lady, why fear an audit more than scandal?" The room held still. Even the fire seemed to lower itself. Lady Petrov's mouth opened and closed once. She turned to Lady Beatrice with a brittle laugh. "You see, delusions, exactly as I said." But the laugh did not land. She took her leave within minutes, gloves snatched, farewells omitted. By evening, 3 versions of the scene were already circulating across Mayfair, each less accurate and more entertaining than the last. In one, Helena had thrown a teacup. In another, she had accused her stepmother of embezzling from war widows. In all, she was either dangerously unstable or gloriously insolent. Both versions were useful to someone. Neither was safe for her. Near dusk the next day, a note came in the Duke's hand, brief as command. Library. 7 o'clock. Bring your notebook. Helena arrived 3 minutes early, then wished she had come late enough to avoid waiting. The library was dim, except for 2 lamps and the ember glow of a newly lit fire. Rain tapped the tall windows. The Duke stood at the long table where she had first handed him the sealed packet, one hand resting on a stack of documents tied in black ribbon. "You have been busy," he said as she entered. "So have my enemies." "Sit." She sat. He remained standing for a moment, then took the chair opposite and placed a familiar envelope between them. The same paper, same dark wax now broken, her father's hand still clear across the front. For a breath she could not touch it. "You said you would not discuss it," she whispered. "I said not at present." He waited until she met his eyes. His voice, when he spoke, had lost its social edge and dropped into something quieter, older. "Your father owed me nothing," the Duke said quietly. "I owed him everything." The words seemed to alter the air. He slid one of the tied documents free and opened it. Shipping records, insurance claims, notarized statements. 11 years ago, before I inherited the dukedom, I was the Marquess of Ashcombe and very nearly the ruin of my family. A convoy failure in winter. 2 ships lost, cargo uninsured due to an error I made and signed. If exposed fully, it would have bankrupted the estate and left my widowed sisters dependent on charity. Helena stared at the papers, then at him. "Your father was my advisor then," he continued. "He took legal responsibility in a restructuring that should have buried him. He absorbed public blame to shield my title, negotiated creditor terms, and spent 6 years rebuilding what I had broken, quietly, without ever using the debt to control me." He gave a short, humourless breath. "I offered repayment. He refused public acknowledgement and demanded only one condition: that support be sent to his household if he died before his daughter was secured." Her fingers closed over the edge of the table. "I honoured that condition," the Duke said, "through intermediaries to avoid gossip and obligation. The transfers were regular for 18 months. Then they began vanishing into new debts before they reached you. I suspected mismanagement. I did not yet have proof of theft." "You knew," she said, "not accusation, not quite." "I knew something was wrong. I did not know how much until you arrived with this." He tapped the packet. In it, your father described contingency names, account channels, and his expectation that his widow might attempt to divert funds under social cover. He instructed me to tell you none of it unless necessity required. A pause. "Necessity required." Helena opened her notebook with fingers that no longer felt entirely hers and spread her copied columns beside his originals. Dates aligned, amounts mirrored. Fraud stopped being suspicion and became architecture. All the years she had spent swallowing insult, believing perhaps she truly was a burden living on diminishing scraps, shifted under her like a floor torn up to reveal another house beneath. "My father planned for me," she said, the words fragile with shock. "Oh, planned for your freedom," the Duke corrected. The fire cracked softly. Rain thickened at the panes. After a long moment, Helena lifted her chin. "Then I do not want private allowances, Your Grace." "I did not offer one. I want records certified, witnesses called, and legal action prepared before Lady Petroff can hide what remains." This time he did not hide approval. "Good!" She drew a breath that steadied by the end. "Tell me what can be proved in court, and what can only be whispered. I will not build on whispers." "We begin tomorrow," he said, "with affidavits and bank subpoenas." She touched the envelope once, reverently, then set it down as if it were no longer relic but instrument. When she rose to leave, the Duke stood as well. At the door she paused. "You were right," she said, without turning. "It is unpleasant." "Yes, but now it is simple." Behind her his answer came low and certain. "No, Miss Petroff. Now it is possible." "No," Helena said, and felt the truth of it settle in her bones. "Now it is possible." The next morning proved how quickly possibility could be contested. Mr. Crane had converted one end of the archive room into a campaign table. Bank circulars, copybooks, legal forms, sealing wax, and 2 clerks drafted in under protest. Helena arrived before 8 to find the Duke already there, coat off, sleeves immaculate despite the dust, reading a memorandum while his solicitor, Mr. Hale, sharpened arguments in a voice like a file. "We proceed on 2 tracks," Mr. Hale said, tapping the table. 1. Immediate injunction against disposal of disputed assets. 2. Compelled production of transfer ledgers from Breyer and Holt and Cartwright Bank. Miss Petrov's copies establish pattern. Originals establish admissibility. Helena slid her notebook forward. Page references are indexed by institution and date. "Mr." Hale blinked at the neat columns, then looked at her with professional surprise. "You've done half my work, madam." "Then do the expensive half quickly," she said. The Duke's mouth twitched. Approval, almost amusement, quickly gone. "Affidavits by noon," he said. "Messenger to Chambers by 1. No delays." For 3 hours the machinery moved. Helena copied sworn statements in duplicate until the web between thumb and forefinger cramped. Mr. Crane dispatched riders. A clerk returned from Breyer and Holt with acknowledgement of subpoena request and a promise that relevant volumes would be produced upon formal notice. It was not victory, but it was structure. At 1:30, structure cracked. A housemaid from the west wing appeared at the office door, pale with alarm. "Miss Petroff, beg pardon. Mrs. Halberd sent me. Your room's been gone through." Helena was on her feet before she knew she'd moved. The upper room in the dower wing looked at first unchanged. Narrow bed, washstand, 2 books, the blue ribbon Nora had once given her wrapped around a candlestick. Then she saw the mattress ticking slit near the seam. Straw spilled in a yellow crescent on the floor. Her notebook was gone. For 1 blank 6 second, she simply stared at the torn cloth, as if staring hard enough might reverse time by 10 minutes. Then sensation returned all at once. Cold hands, hot face, pulse in her throat. "Who had access?" the Duke asked from the doorway behind her. His voice was steady enough to hold on to. Mrs. Halberd arrived, furious and affronted. "Only household staff, Your Grace, and this morning 1 tradesman for chimney flues under supervision. No one from outside was admitted upstairs. I'll have names." "Do," he said, "and lock this floor." Helena crouched, fingers combing straw for anything missed. A loose page, torn corner, 1 scrap with figures. Nothing. Whoever had taken it had known exactly what to seek. Mr. Hale, summoned and briefed, swore under his breath. "Without private notes, we still have your memory and any certified copies already made, but it weakens chain of custody," Helena finished. He did not pretend otherwise. "Yes." By 4:00 the story had moved beyond theft. A newspaper boy shouted in the street below Ashcombe House gates, voice piercing fog and carriage clatter. "Unfortunate young lady mislead. Disturbing conduct in noble household." Mr. Crane bought the sheet and brought it in folded like contamination. Lady Petroff had acted preemptively. Through a family friend, she had given a statement alleging Helena had suffered repeated agitations, fled home in confusion, and fallen under the influence of persons interested in exploiting her disordered fancies regarding accounts she cannot understand. Lord Fenton was quoted declaring himself grieved yet steadfast, and willing to receive her kindly, once restored to reason. Helena read the paragraph once and set the paper down very carefully. "If this stands," Mr. Hale said, "every witness we produce will be heard through the lens of scandal, not fatal, but costly." "To whom?" Helena asked. "To you first," he answered. By evening a formal notice arrived with 2 seals. Petition filed in Doctors' Commons requesting inquiry into Helena Petrov's mental fitness and temporary protective oversight for her own person and property. It was legal varnish over abduction. She had thought she knew fear's shape. This was sharper because it came with signatures. "If they secure interim oversight," Mr. Hale said, "they can argue you are incompetent to direct suit or testify without guardian approval. I am of age. Law does not always prevent abuse. It merely labels it afterward." The Duke took the notice, read, and looked up with winter in his eyes. "Who signed as medical attesters?" Mr. Hale checked. "Dr. Wexley and Dr. Pritchard." "Pritchard owes half his practice to Fenton's tenants," the Duke said flatly. "Then we prove conflict." "Before when?" Helena asked. Mr. Hale hesitated a fraction too long. "Preliminary hearing in 3 days." 3 days, her notebook gone, her name in print as unstable, physicians bought and paid for. If Lady Petroff succeeded, Helena would not only lose the case, she would lose legal personhood. For the first time since leaving home, she understood she might still be dragged back. They did not stop. Fatigue became a schedule. The following day, Helena and Mr. Hale drove to Briar and Holt under steady rain to inspect the requested ledgers in person before formal production. The bank manager, pink and apologetic, met them with clasped hands and catastrophe. "A regrettable accident," he said. "Night leakage in the lower records room. Several quarter books irreparably damaged." "Which quarter books?" Mr. Hale asked. "The spring set. April through June. Ink run, pages adhered. Most unfortunate." Helena went cold. April through June. The exact months where diversions had surged. "I will inspect them," she said. The manager spread his palms. "I cannot permit handling until preservation." "You will permit observation," Mr. Hale cut in, "under authority of subpoena notice." After 20 minutes of argument and one pointed reference to Chancery sanctions, they were taken downstairs. The records room smelled of mildew and paste. 3 volumes lay on a side table, buckled and blackened at edges. Water damage was real. So was selectivity. Upper shelves dry, adjacent years untouched, only the requested quarter ruined beyond legibility. Helena stood over the warped pages and felt an almost physical tearing inside her chest. She had copied numbers. She had built a case on sequence, precision, proof. Proof was now pulp. In the carriage back she kept her gloves on, though they were damp and useless. Mr. Hale spoke briskly about secondary evidence, corroborating drafts, witness testimony. She heard him as if through doors. When they reached Ashcombe House, another blow waited in the porter's hand. Court order requiring Helena's appearance for medical examination the next afternoon pending hearing. Non-appearance would permit officers to compel attendance. "Can they seize her from this house?" the Duke asked when Hale read it aloud. "If she refuses examination, yes," Hale said. "On whose authority?" "The court's interim protective power." Helena's laugh broke unexpectedly. One hard, incredulous sound. "Protective." No one answered. That night she went to the small desk in her room and tried to reconstruct from memory every stolen page. Date, amount, account, witness, transfer. She wrote until lines doubled. Twice she found herself copying the same sequence with one figure different, and could not tell which was true. At midnight she put the pen down and pressed both hands to her eyes until stars burst. A soft knock. Lady Beatrice entered with a tray, broth, bread, and a folded handkerchief she set by Helena's ink-stained fingers, as if laying down terms of peace. "You need salt and sleep," she said. "I need unimpeachable documentary evidence." "All so true." Helena stared at the paper covered in overwritten numbers. "If I misremember one column in public, they will call me fanciful. If they call me fanciful, they call me mad. If they call me mad," Beatrice sat opposite her, "if they call you mad loudly enough, men will believe themselves noble for caging you." The bluntness undid something Helena had been holding shut all day. "I don't know if I can win this now." Beatrice did not soothe. "You may not. Cases are lost by honest women every week." Helena's throat burned. "That is not comforting." "It is not meant to be. Comfort is what people offer when they plan to do nothing." Beatrice leaned forward. "My brother will fight. Mr. Hale will fight. I will bite ankles in drawing rooms until someone bleeds. But you must decide whether to stand tomorrow before men determined to misunderstand you." Helena looked at her ruined pages, then at her own hand, steady now somehow. "I am tired of being interpreted." "Good," Beatrice said. "Use that." After she left, Helena sat alone until the broth cooled, untouched. Doubt remained. So did resolve. They were no longer opposites. They were companions. Across the courtyard in his own study, the Duke dismissed his valet, closed the door and set both palms on the desk until the urge to strike something passed. The room was quiet except for rain at the windows and the small, maddening click of the French clock his mother had loved. On the blotter lay Alexander Petrov's letter, unfolded and refolded so often the crease had begun to whiten. He read it again. "If this reaches you by Helena's hand, circumstances have failed my hope. Do not rescue her by sentiment. Secure her by law, work, and her own capacity, else you only exchange one dependency for another. Law, work, capacity." He had offered all three, and still she stood, one purchased physician, away from confinement. He closed his eyes and saw, as he had not allowed himself to see in years, a winter chart table lit by one smoking lamp, his younger hand signing an insurance waiver he had not fully reviewed because he was proud and hurried and wanted to prove himself decisive. 2 ships had sailed under that signature and not returned. Men had drowned in dark water because he had needed to be competent before he had become competent. Alexander had stood beside him through the inquiries, taken blame that should have clung to Ashcombe like tar, and accepted contempt in silence so a title could survive. Debt was too small a word for that. A knock came without waiting. Beatrice entered in travelling cloak, rein on her shoulders, eyes sharp with the affection she used like a weapon. "You look abominable," she said. "Thank you." "She thinks she has failed." He sank into the chair opposite the fire and let some part of the mask drop. "She may fail. Hale says the damaged ledgers are near fatal." Beatrice took the other chair, not graceful, just present. "Then why do I find you here, brooding instead of out bribing the half of London?" "Because if I am seen bribing half of London, her case collapses as ducal interference." "Ah," Beatrice said softly, "power with handcuffs." He gave a short laugh that held no humour. "If I act too little, I fail her, as I failed her father. If I act too much, I destroy the very independence he demanded I protect." Beatrice watched him for a moment. "Is this only about Alexander?" He stared at the fire. The answer, when it came, felt like opening an old wound with clean steel. "No." "Then say the rest." He hated being read. He hated that she was right. "I want to ask her to marry me, and I cannot." Beatrice did not startle. Because she would refuse? Because she might accept for safety. And if she accepted now, every accusation Lady Petrov has made would harden into fact in the public mind. Ambitious girl ensnares Duke, invents accounts, discards prior arrangement. His jaw tightened. I will not make her testimony suspect to ease my fear. Your fear? That I cannot keep her safe by rules that already failed once. Silence stretched, warmer than argument. Beatrice reached over, squeezed his wrist once, brief, fierce. Then do the difficult thing, she said. Stand near enough to catch her if she falls, not so near that anyone says you carried her. After she left, he sat with the letter until the clock struck 2. At 3 he sent a private note to a magistrate he trusted and requested attendance at Thursday's Sandell Assembly in anticipation of possible disturbance requiring immediate legal witnessing. It was not a move a man made lightly. At 4 he slept for an hour and dreamed of dark water. The medical examination the next afternoon was as degrading as Helena had expected, and worse than she had imagined. 2 physicians asked whether she heard voices, whether menses unsettled her reason, whether she had ever read novels to excess, whether she suffered fancies of persecution. She answered each question in a level tone, and watched them write whatever suited them. When she returned to Ashcombe House, drenched and furious, Hale met her in the hall with a face that told the news before he spoke. Lady Petrov has moved again, he said. She and Lord Fenton intend to announce your betrothal publicly tomorrow night at the Sandell Assembly, claiming reconciliation. I have not reconciled. They will say your recent confusion has resolved under family guidance. Hale held out a card. You are summoned to attend. If absent, they mean to present it as proof you are being hidden. Hidden, Helena repeated, in the middle of London. The Duke came in from the rain as Hale spoke, gloves wet, expression carved from intent. They've secured support from 2 patronesses. Half the room will applaud before questions are asked. And the other half will gossip while I am carried out, Helena said. If you attend, Hale said carefully, you risk confrontation, possibly physical. If you do not, they define the narrative uncontested before the hearing. There it was, the narrow bridge again, suspended over ruin. Helena took the card, ivory stock, embossed border, Lady Sandal's florid hand. Thursday, 9 o'clock, music and announcement. She thought of her father's envelope on the library table. Law, work, capacity. I will attend, she said. The Duke's gaze held hers. Then we prepare as if for battle. Preparation consumed the day. Copies were made of every surviving document, each packet sealed and indexed in Helena's hand. Mr. Hale drafted a statement sequence she might follow, if granted the floor. Mr. Crane arranged discreet delivery of notices to 2 banking clerks and 1 handwriting examiner to be present for social reasons. Lady Beatrice selected Helena's gown with strategic malice. Dark grey silk, severe, impossible to trivialise. At dusk, as Nora might once have done, Beatrice fastened the last hook at Helena's back and said, Do not speak quickly. Let silence make them lean in. By 8:30 the carriages were lined before Sandell House, lamps burning through mist. Inside, chandeliers blazed above a crowd already humming with anticipation and appetite. Helena felt eyes hit her like weather as she entered on the Duke's arm, not touching him beyond protocol, not looking left or right. Near the front of the assembly room, Lady Petrov stood in rose satin beside Lord Fenton, radiant with triumph sharpened to a point. When she saw Helena, her smile widened as if a truant child had finally come home for punishment. Music ended. Lady Sandell clinked her glass for attention and began to speak of happy settlements and family harmony. The Duke, beside Helena, did not move. "Last chance," he murmured. "We can leave." Helena looked toward the far wall where a plain-coated gentleman had just entered quietly and taken position near the column. Magistrate, if she guessed right. Beyond him, rows of faces waited to be entertained by her fate. Her fear did not vanish. It aligned. "No," she said. "We stay." Lady Sandell turned, arm extended toward Lord Fenton for the announcement. Helena stepped forward into the open space before anyone could close it. Lady Sandell's sentence died half-born as Helena crossed into the centre of the room. "Before any announcement is made," Helena said, clear enough to cut through the hum, "I request leave to speak." A rustle moved across the assembly. Shock, delight, outrage, appetite. No hostess wanted disorder in her rooms, and no crowd ever refused it once offered. Lady Sandell blinked rapidly. "My dear Miss Petrov, this is hardly—" "It concerns the announcement," Helena said, "and whether it is lawful." That word landed. Lawful was not scandal. Lawful was danger. Lord Fenton stepped forward with a smile that showed no warmth. "You are overwrought again. Come, child, enough public dramatics." "I am 22, Helena said. "Do not call me child." Lady Petrov gave a small, pained laugh for the room. "You see, this agitation is exactly what we hope to spare her. Helena, darling, you are unwell. Let us not perform your confusion before friends." Helena turned, not to her stepmother, but to the men near the card-room doors. One banking clerk she recognised, one handwriting examiner, and the plain-coated gentleman by the column. "Mr. Hale," she called, "if you please." The solicitor stepped out from the wall, where he had been pointedly unremarkable, and handed her a document case. Murmurs sharpened. Helena opened the case on a side table, withdrew tied packets, and arranged them in a straight line. Her hands were steady now. The tremor had burned away. "Lady Sandell," she said, "I apologise for using your assembly as a forum. I do so because my person has been publicly claimed without consent, and because documents relevant to fraud and coercion are being suppressed." "You impertinent!" Lady Petrov began. Helena lifted a hand, not to silence her by force, but by sequence. "These are certified copies of transfer ledgers, promissory notes, witness signatures, and correspondence between Breyer and Holt, Cartwright Bank, and my late father's associated accounts." She touched each bundle as she named it, indexed chronologically, cross-referenced by date and hand. A matron near the front whispered, "Good God, she brought evidence to a musicale." Lord Fenton moved closer, voice dropping. "You will stop this now." "No." He caught her wrist. It happened so quickly that for one suspended instant no one reacted, the way people fail to believe violence in silk rooms until it stains something expensive. His fingers bit bone. Helena felt the old instinct to freeze, to placate, to survive quietly. Then she stepped back hard, wrenching free, and raised her voice. "Sir, release me." "Magistrate, attend if you please." The plain-coated gentleman was already moving. "Edmund Reeve, sitting magistrate," he said, producing credentials. "I am present by prior request. Lord Fenton, stand away from the lady." The room broke into noise. Lady Sandell cried for order. Two gentlemen argued over propriety. Someone laughed with nerves. The Duke had not moved until then. He came to Helena's side, but did not touch her, only stood where the room could not mistake his witness. "Proceed, Miss Petrov," he said. So she did. She did not raise her voice again. She did not plead. She read. "Transfer 12 April, amount £800, sent under pension instruction, to household Petrov via intermediary account. 2 days later, matching sum withdrawn to satisfy private gaming note, signed Lady Petrov, witnessed by Mrs. Canning's steward. She lifted one page, then another. Transfer, 1st May, £600. Converted same day into personal debt instrument at 14% with Fenton Holdings listed as creditor. Every head turned toward Lord Fenton. "That is a lie," he snapped. "Then dispute the signature before Mr. Blackwell," Helena said, indicating the handwriting examiner. "He is present." Mr. Blackwell bowed, uncomfortable and fascinated. "I am prepared to compare hands, if instructed." Lady Petroff drew herself up, cheeks bright. All this from a girl who tears gowns at supper and imagines herself a surgeon and banker by turns. She has been in a state for weeks. Physicians can attest. "Physicians in your pay," Helena said. "Dr. Pritchard's accounts are under Fenton tenancy. Dr. Wexley accepted retainer from your solicitors 3 days before examination order." A hiss of disbelief swept the room. Lord Fenton lunged verbally when he could not do so physically. "You ungrateful little nobody! I offered you protection." "You offered ownership," Helena answered. Lady Petroff's voice rose brittle. "Your father left us debts, not fortune. I kept this family afloat while you copied columns like a servant and judged your betters." At that, the Duke stepped forward, each syllable precise. "Alexander Petroff preserved my house from ruin at cost, to his own reputation," he said. "Funds sent thereafter to secure his daughter were diverted. I attest this under my name and title, and I will attest it under oath." Silence dropped like a curtain. Even Lady Sandell stopped breathing visibly. Helena felt a sting behind her eyes then. One tear, traitorous and hot. She wiped it away with the back of her hand before it could fall to her mouth, and continued. "I make no claim to rank," she said, "only to legal control of my person and income, and to accurate accounting of monies entrusted for my maintenance. I refuse the engagement announced in this room. I refuse any guardianship petition brought on false grounds, and I request immediate seizure of relevant records before further destruction." Magistrate Reeve looked from her documents to the principals, measuring not drama, but grounds. "Given allegations of financial fraud, coercive betrothal, and witness intimidation," he said, "I issue preliminary order, no disposal of contested assets, no forced removal of Miss Petroff from current residence, and compulsory production of bank records pending hearing at 10 o'clock tomorrow." Lady Petroff made a strangled sound. "On whose testimony?" "On hers," Reeve said, "supported by documentary exhibits and corroborating parties present. You may answer in court." Lord Fenton took one step as if to protest further. Reeve's constable, summoned from the hall, placed himself between them. "Not another inch, my lord." The assembly had become a tribunal in chandeliers. People watched with the avid horror reserved for seeing power questioned by someone they had catalogued as powerless. Helena gathered her papers, each in order, each ribbon retied. Her pulse pounded so hard she could feel it in her damaged wrist. Lady Petroff leaned close as the room fractured into whispers. "You think this is victory. Courts are slow. Memory is fragile. You are still alone." Helena met her gaze and for the first time in years did not lower hers. "No," she said, "I am not." Court was uglier than the assembly because it wore honesty as costume. Doctors' Commons smelled of damp wool, ink, and old arguments. By the time Helena took her place, benches were crowded with observers pretending civic interest and carrying social hunger. Lady Petroff sat rigid in dove grey, veil immaculate. Lord Fenton radiated affront. Their counsel, Mr. Jessup, smiled as if trials were card tables. Mr. Hale opened with economy, pattern of diverted funds, attempted coercion, compromised medical attestations, destroyed records. Then Jessup rose and tried to turn Helena into vapour. "Miss Petroff," he began pleasantly, "you have lived under strain." Yes. You admit to episodes of agitation, publicly dramatic conduct at Ashcombe House, tearing clothing, issuing commands to servants above your station. I tore cloth to staunch hemorrhage, Helena said. The servant lived. A few pens paused. Jessup changed tack. You have no original notebook of your alleged copies, do you? It was stolen from my room after notice of legal action. How convenient! How predictable, she replied. He circled, probing for inconsistency. Dates, amounts, names. She answered each. Once he made her repeat a sequence backward. She did. When he tried to force speed, she slowed. Then he produced his surprise. A ledger leaf, half charred at edge, purportedly recovered from Breyer and Holt, showing one disputed transfer marked household expenses in a different hand. Does this refresh your memory? He asked. Helena looked. Ink colour wrong for quarter, margin ruling narrower than Breyer's standard, abbreviation style unlike any clerk there used. No, she said, it confirms forgery. Jessup's brows lifted. Bold claim. Helena turned to the bench. With leave, I ask the bank clerk, Mr. Ellery, to identify line format and binding marks. Reeve nodded. Ellery, sweating, took the page and swallowed. This leaf is not from our April-June quarter volume. Stitch holes do not match. Also, we do not use this ruling width. Murmurs rose. Jessup objected, overruled. Helena asked one more question. Mr. Ellery, who had after-hours access to the lower records room the night of the flood? Ellery's eyes darted toward Lady Petrov's side, then down. Temporary key issued to Mr. Lark, agent for Fenton Holdings, signed under urgency. Lord Fenton half rose. Liar! Sit! Reeve snapped. The case tilted. Lady Petrov did not collapse. She fought like a cornered strategist, abandoning dignity for velocity. She claimed Helena had forged signatures while in Ashcombe custody. Helena produced dated copies made before her move, witnessed by a neutral stationer. She claimed ducal coercion. The Duke submitted Alexander's original sealed letter and offered himself for hostile questioning, accepting every insinuation without flinching so long as the contents entered record. She claimed maternal concern. Hale introduced letters discussing placement value and arrangements for Helena's marriage, recovered from Lady Petrov's own desk under order. When Jessup tried one final strike, Miss Petrov seeks to trap higher rank through manufactured dependence. Helena stood before he finished. I sought wages first, she said. I asked employment, not rescue. I stand here under oath at risk to my own name because truth without risk is only performance. Reeve watched her a long moment, then called brief recess. When he returned, his ruling came measured, devastating. Petition for mental incapacity is dismissed for bad faith and conflicted attestations. Interim control over Miss Petrov's person or property is denied. Preliminary finding supports substantial misdirection of designated funds, possible forgery, and coercive matrimonial conduct. Lady Petrov is removed from direct management of remaining Petrov assets, pending full chancery accounting. Lord Fenton is barred from private contact with Miss Petrov and referred for inquiry into record tampering. A collective exhale ran through the room. Lady Petrov stood very straight, only her hands betraying her, fingers digging crescents into her gloves. This is not finished. No, Reeve said. It is begun. Outside, rain had stopped. Stone steps steamed faintly in weak sun. Reporters shouted. Carriages jostled. Lady Petrov paused before entering hers and turned back once, eyes glittering with hatred and something almost like disbelief. Helena did not look away. Lord Fenton slammed his door so hard the glass shivered. Within the week he would be gone to Calais, loudly protesting insult, quietly avoiding further process. But in that moment he was still there, red-faced and thwarted, and Helena felt, not triumph exactly, but release of a pressure she had mistaken for permanent weather. Mr. Hale let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "Miss Petroff," he said, "you are the most dangerous witness I have ever instructed." "Thank you," she said, and meant it. The world changed first in paperwork. 3 days after the ruling, Helena sat in Mr. Hale's chambers while a clerk read each clause aloud. Restored dowry in modest amount, trust protections, sole legal control of her wages, prohibition on unauthorised guardianship petitions, supervised allowance assigned to Lady Petroff's reduced household in Bath. Each line translated survival into structure. "Sign here," the clerk said. Helena signed. Her hand shook only after. When she left the chambers, the street seemed indecently normal. A boy sold roasted chestnuts. 2 women argued over bonnet ribbon. A dog slept against a fishmonger's barrel. No one looking would know she had just recovered herself in law. That evening, in the West Wing sitting room, she sat by the fire with her wrist unbandaged at last, and discovered her body had kept a separate ledger from her mind. Now that danger had receded, exhaustion arrived violent and complete. She stared at the flames until they blurred. A knock sounded. The Duke entered at Lady Beatrice's invitation, then stopped when he saw Helena's face. "Have you eaten?" Beatrice asked. Helena considered as if the answer required research. "At some point in this decade." Beatrice snorted and rang for tray service. When food came, Helena managed broth and half a heel of bread before setting the spoon down. "I thought I would feel victorious." "What do you feel?" the Duke asked. She searched. "Like a room after guests leave. Everything still standing, but moved." He nodded, as if that made complete sense. Later, after Beatrice had retired and the household dimmed, Helena walked alone to the library where the first letter had opened her life apart. The Duke was there by habit more than chance, one lamp lit, papers untouched in front of him. "I came to return this," she said, handing him her father's packet sleeve, now protected in new fold. He took it carefully. "It belongs with you." "It belongs with both of us," she said. "He trusted you. He prepared me. Neither alone would have been enough." For a moment his control flickered, grief and gratitude crossing too quickly for names. "I am sorry," he said quietly, "for every month I suspected and did not act sooner. You acted when I arrived. I should have looked harder before." She stepped closer. "If you had come earlier with charity and no proof, Lady Petroff would have called it interference. If you had paid me quietly, I would still be dependent. This way hurt more. It also worked." He gave a short breath, almost a laugh. "You are infuriatingly reasonable." "I have been called worse in print." His gaze dropped to her wrist where bruises were yellowing. "I should have struck him." "You should not have," she said. "If you had, this would have become 2 men quarrelling over me. Instead, it remained what it was." He looked up. And what was it? A woman refusing to be transferred. Silence held, not empty now, but full of things waiting. At last he said, "Mr. Hale informed me of an offer made this afternoon." She blinked. "You know already?" "I know most things by supper. Will you accept?" The offer was from the Wounded Veterans Relief Board, paid position managing subscription accounts and disbursements, 3 days weekly, full authority to audit regional claims, real work, necessary work. "Yes," Helena said, and felt something inside settle into place. "I will." "Good." He paused. "Then this house must become transitional, not permanent." She understood the courtesy in that and the distance. "Yes." When she left the library, she did not feel alone. Spring came with mud, daffodils and public amnesia, pretending it had believed her all along. Helena took rooms of her own near Bloomsbury, small, sunny at noon, with a desk that wobbled unless folded paper was tucked under one leg. On Mondays and Thursdays she sat at the relief board offices amid ink pots and veterans with missing fingers, balancing subscription books no one else had properly reconciled in years. She discovered quickly that charity drew both saints and thieves. She preferred the books. They lied less. And when they lied, they left traces. One morning, a former sergeant with a scarred jaw removed his cap in her doorway and said, "Beg pardon, ma'am. They told me to ask the gentleman treasurer, but you're the one who caught that Portsmouth fraud, aren't you?" "I am," Helena said. He placed a folded petition in front of her. "Then I'd rather ask you." Work did what comfort could not. It gave her competence room to breathe. The Duke called properly, always by arrangement, never presuming entry to the hours she had marked for herself. Sometimes they walked in Russell Square and discussed nothing more intimate than shipping tariffs and Beatrice's savage opinions on opera. Sometimes they argued about pension structures until dusk. Sometimes they sat in companionable quiet while rain made lace of the glass. Months passed. Affection stopped being crisis-shaped and became daily, deliberate. In July he asked if he might escort her to Kew. She agreed. They walked the long border where late roses were beginning to blow, red and cream against clipped yew, the river smell warm beyond. At the far end, away from the crowd, he stopped beneath a cedar and turned to face her fully. "I have rehearsed this badly," he said. "That sounds unlike you." "It is unlike me." He took a breath and did not look away. "I love you." No title, no circumlocution, just the words raw and plain. Helena felt her pulse in her throat. "Ashcombe, let me finish, or I will lose nerve and become formal." His mouth curved faintly, then steadied. "I loved you before I admitted it to myself, which is to say, I admired your mind and feared for your safety and found every excuse to keep the distinction clean. I did not speak because you needed freedom first, and because I could not bear the possibility that you might accept me from gratitude or shelter. I would not. I know that now." He stepped closer, still not touching. "I do not offer rescue. I offer partnership, argument, shared work, and whatever tenderness I have learned too late to hide. Marry me, Helena. Not as debt repaid, not as scandal repaired, but because we choose the same life." Her eyes stung unexpectedly. "You speak like a man who has practised." "In mirrors, to the horror of my valet." She laughed, then pressed her lips together as emotion rose. "I was afraid," she said quietly, "that if this came I would not know whether it was for me or for my father's ghost." "It is for you," he said at once. "Your father I honour. You I love." She searched his face and found no reserve left there, only a steadiness warmer than any declaration she had imagined. "I love you too," she said, "not because you stood between me and harm, though you did, because you stood beside me while I fought, because you listen when I am difficult, because you let me work." A visible breath left him, almost a shudder. "Then, yes," Helena said, "yes, I will marry you." He closed the distance then, taking her hands first as if asking once more without words, and when she leaned toward him, he kissed her, careful for half a heartbeat, then not careful at all. When they parted, he rested his forehead briefly against hers. "You have made me very happy," he said, sounding astonished by it. "Good," she said. "You may continue." They married in autumn at a small chapel, with Beatrice weeping openly and denying it afterward. No trumpets, no spectacle. Her vow voice did not shake. In winter, frost whitened Ashcombe House windows and turned the courtyard cobbles to iron. Helena, now Duchess in title, Helena still in habit, sat at the breakfast room table with ledgers open beside toast, reviewing relief board disbursements before carriage hour. A young footman entered with the tea tray and, seeing her papers spread, tried to set it down too quickly. One cup slipped, struck the edge, and shattered across the carpet in white shards and hot amber. He went ghost pale. "Your Grace, I beg—" Helena was already on her knees gathering pieces before anyone stepped on them. "Stay back," she said. "Mind the edges." The footman looked stricken enough to faint. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am." "It is a cup," she said, glancing up. "Not a hanging offence." At the doorway the Duke appeared, having heard the crash. He took in the scene, his Duchess kneeling among porcelain, terrified servants spreading tea, and, without ceremony, removed his coat and knelt beside her. "Here," he said, holding out his hand for the larger fragments. "You always take the dangerous pieces yourself." "I have experience." "So do I," he answered. The footman stared as if witnessing treason against hierarchy. Helena smiled at him, quick and kind. "Fetch a cloth, Thomas, and tell Mrs. Halberd no one is to be scolded." "Yes, Your Grace," he said, voice cracking with relief, and fled. Together Helena and Ashcombe gathered the last shards. Sunlight came through the winter glass and struck the walnut sideboard opposite, the same one her father had commissioned long ago, now polished, restored and used. When the floor was clear, the Duke rose and offered her his hand. She took it and stood. "Will you be late to your veterans?" he asked. "Only if you keep me talking." He bent and kissed her temple in the bright morning quiet. "Then go save my accounts from my stewards." She laughed, collected her papers, and walked out of the breakfast room upright, unhurried, and entirely her own.